Humanity had always dreamed of reaching the stars, and when we finally did, we were eager to carve out a place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. We built alliances, established trade routes, and colonized distant worlds. With our natural ambition and adaptability, we quickly became a recognized power in the galactic community. There were dangers, of course, pirates, territorial disputes, the occasional conflict over resources, but nothing we couldn't handle. We had seen war before, and we had survived. But in our excitement to expand, in our desperate race to prove ourselves, we made a mistake, one so small, so seemingly insignificant, that at first, no one even noticed. It was nothing more than an automated mining operation, a routine expedition to an unremarkable planet orbiting a dying star. A nameless corporation had sent a fleet of robotic harvesters to extract valuable minerals from a lifeless rock catalogued as XYPHOS-37. No atmosphere, no vegetation, no signs of intelligent life. Just another resource waiting to be claimed. The mining fleet touched down and began its work, drilling deep into the planet's crust, ripping out precious metals and exotic materials. Everything proceeded as expected, until, within hours, all contact with the fleet was lost. No distress signal, no emergency transmission. Just silence. The corporation assumed a malfunction, perhaps a communications failure, and dispatched a second team to investigate. They, too, vanished without a trace. It was then that long-range sensors picked up something disturbing. The planet, previously believed to be nothing more than an inert chunk of rock, was now exhibiting strange seismic activity. But the readings didn't match any known natural phenomenon. The disturbances weren't random, they were coordinated. It was as if something beneath the surface was moving. What we didn't know, what no one had told us, was that XYPHOS-37 was not just another planet. It was a tomb. Buried beneath its surface, in vast, ancient chambers, was a horror so great that the galaxy had tried to erase all knowledge of its existence. The species entombed there had no true name, at least not one that could be spoken in any known language. The few alien records that remained referred to them only as the Revenants. They were not conquerors. They were not an empire. They did not seek power or territory. They were something far worse. The Revenants were extinction incarnate. Wherever they appeared, civilizations vanished. Entire planets were stripped of life, their populations reduced to nothing but echoes and dust. No one knew where they came from, or what drove them, only that once they were unleashed, they did not stop until their work was done. Thousands of years ago, during the last war against them, 3 of the galaxy's greatest empires had joined forces in a desperate attempt to destroy them. They failed. Instead, at an unimaginable cost, they managed to contain them, trapping them deep beneath the surface of XYPHOS-37 in a prison of rock and metal. It had been assumed they would remain buried forever. Until we came along and woke them up. The first sign of their return was the disappearance of our research ship orbiting XYPHOS-37. The last transmission it sent was a garbled mess of screams and static before the signal cut out entirely. Then, a nearby colony, one of our most advanced, home to millions, went dark. No distress calls, no evacuation, just silence. A fleet was dispatched to investigate. What they found was worse than annihilation. The colony was intact, its buildings still standing, its infrastructure untouched. But it was empty. Every single person, every last soul, was gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if the entire population had simply ceased to exist. Then the attack began. A darkness swept across the colony, shifting and writhing like a living shadow. The fleet's sensors detected movement, but whatever it was moved faster than anything we had ever encountered. Ships were torn apart in seconds. Soldiers on the ground fired at what they could only describe as something that should not be. Their bullets, their energy weapons, their explosives, none of it mattered. The Revenants did not die. They absorbed. They adapted. The battle was over before it had even begun. The last transmission from the fleet was a single sentence, spoken in a voice choked with horror. They are not attacking. They are consuming. Desperate, we turned to the Galactic Council for help, certain that our allies would come to our aid. But when we reached out, we received no response. No reinforcements. No warnings. Nothing. At first, we thought our messages had been blocked. But then, in secret, we managed to track down an ambassador who had fled before the chaos began. The truth was worse than we could have imagined. The Council had known. They had known about the Revenants for thousands of years. And long ago, they had made a terrible decision. If the Revenants were ever awakened again, the Council would not fight them. They had already lost too much in the last war. Instead, they would abandon whatever species had been foolish enough to set them free. They would isolate the infected worlds, erase them from the star charts, and pretend they had never existed. In other words, the moment we touched XYPHOS 37, our fate had been sealed. We were not just at war. We had already been written off as dead. With no one coming to save us, humanity had only one choice: fight or die. We threw everything we had at the Revenants. New weapons were developed. AI-driven war fleets were launched. Elite soldiers, the best we had, stood against an enemy that defied all logic. And then we learned the worst truth of all. The Revenants were learning. Every battle, they grew stronger. Every weapon we used, they adapted to counter. They didn't just resist our attacks, they evolved. We weren't fighting an enemy. We were feeding it. There was only one option left. If we couldn't win, we would deny them their prize. A doomsday device was built. Not to destroy the Revenants, but to destroy ourselves. A self-inflicted extinction event, an act of defiance so extreme that it went against everything we believed in. If we erased ourselves fast enough, perhaps the Revenants would return to hibernation. And then, at the final moment, something impossible happened. The Revenants stopped. They didn't retreat. They didn't advance. They simply froze. And then, without warning, they vanished. No explanation, no trace. They were just gone. We don't know why. Maybe they sensed the device and realized we were willing to destroy ourselves before letting them win. Maybe they had already taken what they wanted. Or maybe, they never saw us as a threat in the first place. The war ended as suddenly as it had begun, but the scars remained. Our worlds lay in ruins. Our so-called allies had abandoned us. And worst of all, we had no idea if the Revenants were truly gone, or if they were simply waiting. Because if there is one thing we know now, it is this: there are things in this galaxy that should never be disturbed. And we, in our arrogance, woke one of them. We got lucky this time. But if they ever return, one thing is certain: we will not survive.